I volunteered for the US Army at the same time everyone else was protesting against the war in Iraq. Um, and the reason I did that was because I believed what was on TV. I believed what the president was saying. I drank the Kool-Aid. I came from a federal family. I was taught that the government was fundamentally good. And I still believe that the government can be fundamentally good. But I have realized through my experience and through discoveries of the fact that the private truths known to and held by governments are often very different. And in fact, we're completely the opposite of their public statements and public promises, their claims of a duty and sense of obligation to the public, what those happen to be. That tension there is the teachable lesson. I should have paid more attention. I didn't, because I simply had faith. I was privileged. I wasn't impacted by any of these policies. Most of my political understanding came from Hollywood movies and culture. And the reality is, if you're always portrayed as the good guys, you begin to believe that you are the good guy, particularly when you start to associate with them, particularly when you get, secret handshakes and top secret clearances and polygraphs and all the fun accoutrements of being, on the inside. And I was sheltered from the kind of hard political thinking because of the fact that I worked in technology. And this is what's happening in Facebook today. This is what's happening in Google today, and Microsoft today, at Amazon today, is we begin to see the same kind of awakenings that I went through as a young man beginning to be replicated in a new generation of young people, because the reality is all work is political work. I don't care if you're selling hot dogs on the street. We're all confronted with choices about how our labor is used, how we direct that, who we are really serving, who we're working for, and who benefits from the labor of our lives. Technologists like to believe that technology is value neutral. Engineers, they like to believe that they're like scientists. What they do is something that's pure, and they're just trying to get the rocket up. Where the rocket comes down is not their department. That's somebody else's problem. In the last century, we had the same problem where a generation of physicists harnessed the power of the atom, exciting new technology. They thought they were building clean energy. They thought they were realizing the future. And then all their hard work became one of the most atrocious weapons in the history of humanity, maybe second only to biological weapons. And this is what we're seeing today. We're seeing the atomic moment for technology. We're seeing people who made, Angry Birds and Flappy Birds and little clicky pokey apps to pass the time, things that would not be thought of as dangerous or political at all. People who make spreadsheets, people who make weather apps, people who just wanted to create, family tree websites. All of them are being bought out, are being subverted, are being corrupted, are being incentivized into building capabilities into their platforms, into their apps that fundamentally work against the public and in the favor of some institution, wherever they happen to be. And they don't see the big picture largely because they see themselves at the atomic level, in the individual level. They see themselves in their office. They see themselves in their project. They see themselves in their unit. They see themselves in their sector. They don't see themselves as part of the larger world. But the longer that we do that, the more and more problems are being created at scale, sub rosa, beneath our notice. But they're building up and aggregating until we see a catalyzing event, like a George Floyd, where all of these people who didn't realize the impacts of all the things they did, all the politicians who made the votes to say, hey, all this leftover equipment from Iraq, why don't we give that to police departments so, it goes to a positive use? And now suddenly you see that our police look like stormtroopers in a film, black uniforms, black guns, black everything, they're just missing the skulls on the helmets. And I think when everyone out there, when all of you, when everybody who's connected, wherever you are in the world right now, you're listening to this, you're thinking about this, I want you to think about the world. I want you to think about the news that you see in every day, and just think: did you agree to this? Does this represent you? Is this what you want? Is this how things should be? And I think, Congress would say that it doesn't matter, the majority won. The police would say you don't have a choice, stop resisting. And Facebook would say that you actually did consent. But I don't think you did, and I bet you don't think so either. They pretend that we consent. They pretend we agree because of where we were born, or where we have no choice but to live, or simply because we had to click that OK button in order to use our phone, in order to survive, in order to connect. So much of human experience exists behind gates, whether those are chain link fence, whether those are armed border points, whether it's the body scanner at TSA, whether it's the metal detector at Walmart, whether it's just the camera that's outside our apartment buildings. When we think about how this is changing from the physical control of our circumstances to the informatic control of our circumstances, this compilation of data, the way we interact, the way we get jobs, who gets a loan, who goes to school, all the decisions that impact our lives on the longest scale terms, the biggest decisions. These are, again, being intermediated, if not by technology, then informed by technology. And the people who are making those decisions are increasingly submitting or complementing their decision-making process with what the computer says. If they can't find you in the computer, God help you, because you don't exist. But the reality is, think about that moment. Think about that idea that you have consented to everything that Facebook does, which you had no idea because they don't announce it. It happens privately, it happens secretly in all these agreements that they don't have any obligation to inform you about, because you clicked OK. You didn't know what you were agreeing to. You couldn't have known what you were agreeing to without reading all of this legalese, which the very first point of which is always these terms are subject to change at any time without notice. So you would be wasting your time if you read it. And just realizing that the world is becoming increasingly centralized. Everything that we're talking about, all of these conflicts are being driven in a real way by inequality. Whether we're talking about access to medical care in a pandemic, whether we're talking about access to justice in a brutality crisis, right? There are haves and there are have-nots. And we see institutions, we see corporations are the haves, and increasingly the individual, the family, the community are the have-nots. And we ask, how did this come to be? Did we vote on that? Did we have any influence of that? And it intentionally happened behind closed doors. It intentionally happened quietly. It intentionally happened as part of an expert conversation that invented its own language, its own terms, its own structure to exclude us from, so that we could not engage in it.